The sixth R, revivalist. A revivalist could be defined in a few different ways. But Robert Slaridan mentions that a revivalist is a new form of mass evangelist. Now, he's talking about new in the 1700s. A new form of mass evangelist. And that makes a lot of sense for what he writes about in his books. It's the names that are associated with these big moves of God. And in this sense, a revivalist is a person God uses to bring the gospel in a way that sparks big-scale revival. Now, God uses a catalyst in these moves of God. There's always people associated with these moves of God. So it takes prayer and it takes a catalyst to spark this. It's kind of like, I kind of picture it as like, deep cries unto deep. There's something deep in a prayer warrior that's crying out to God. Bring it. And then there's something deep in a revivalist that's crying, God, I want to go bring this. And God brings them together. Does that make sense? With me? Okay. All right. Okay. So some people, even here may be thinking, well, God is sovereign. He doesn't need to use a person in order to bring revival. Well, but what does what God needs ever have to do with anything? If it was about what God needs, what does God need? Nothing. So we can't really base any arguments on what God needs. This isn't about his needs, it's about his plan. Duncan Campbell, the revivalist that we talked about last week in the Hebrides revival, he said this, and I think this hits the nail on the head. It says, we do not believe in any conception of sovereignty which nullifies our responsibility. It's both and. So God will bring revival as his people, who he appointed, who he commissioned, begin to step into what he appointed us to and commissioned us to. In his sovereignty, he made that commission, and he works with his people to complete the task that he assigned. God has always used people. God wants to use people. God set it up to use people. And if God wanted to do his thing apart from people, then he wouldn't have sent his son as a person, as a man. That's the best argument to me that God wants to use people. Jesus could have snapped his fingers from heaven. Couldn't he? I assume. But the way God set it up in God's plan, it required a person to carry the Spirit and to die for everyone else that we could do the same and continue on his work. So when we realize God wants to use me, that's when the rubber meets the road. Robbie Dawkins, you've probably heard us mention him before, but he always says, the next revival for your town is sitting in your seat. Well, that's pretty good. And then this next quote from Tony Kachi, however you say his name, says, you will see, this is in the context of learning about revivalists, you'll see how our mighty God reached into the lives of ordinary people like us, despite their weaknesses, fears, and failings, and equipped them to become shafts of light that dispelled the darkness in their generation. They were ordinary people who experienced an extraordinary God. Ordinary people who experienced an extraordinary God. So, if revival is about bringing life to something that's dead, a revivalist is somebody who carries the life of God inside of them, and they give that away to revive others. I think of it, there's a vineyard term, people of the presence. You guys heard that? No one's heard of it? Okay, good. Come on, Jeff, what are you preaching? I can pick on him if he's not here. People of the presence, someone whose life They walk with God in such an intimate way that their life just seems to be saturated with God. The presence of God. Everything they touch, everything they do, how they live their lives just exudes that God is with them. Duncan Campbell used this term last week also in the clip we watched. He said, an awareness of God gripped the community. I would say that a revivalist exists to bring an awareness of God. That's what they live for. It's probably stirring in some of your hearts even as I'm saying that. So, yes, these big names and these associated with these big moves of God, they're revivalists for sure. But what if God wants to use you to be a revivalist in your community, or at your workplace, or in your home? I don't know that there's a certain qualification for size of how much life you have to bring to how much death to be a revivalist. You just bring it. I think that I don't want anybody to feel disqualified because I'm sharing these incredible stories in history that have stood for hundreds of years because they're amazing. And I want you to be inspired. Don't let the enemy use something that was good to disqualify you. He's always trying to disqualify us from stepping into who he wants us to be. Does that make sense? Okay, so be inspired. 2 Chronicles 16:9 says, for the eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him. Now I'm taking this out of context, but I think it holds true. That God is looking for hearts that are fully devoted to him still today. That's what a revivalist is. His heart's fully devoted to God and doing the work of God. And God will strengthen and equip those who are sold out to him. I'm pretty sure he'll make good on that.